chance and honored to hear her before. She is definitely an inspiration, even a mentor. She is just phenomenal. Thank you, thank you, thank you for making the trip here. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you, Ron. I'm blushing. Thank you, Ron, so much for that nice introduction. And the Rochester Clinic, May and Jang, it's such a privilege to be here. And I flew in late last night. I had a little bit of work in the Bahamas, and I realized when I packed that it was very hot in the Bahamas. And once I got there, I thought, oh no, I need to get something that's going to be warm for Rochester, and they had nothing there. So I'm kind of wearing my tropical clothes still. So thank goodness I had a coat. But it's just so exciting to be back here. And I am a physician at Mayo Clinic. I see people at all three sites. But I have to tell you, as soon as I land in Rochester, Minnesota, it gives me chills. And I'm going to talk about that. I get chills all the time. But there's just so much love in this city. So I love being here. And May and Jang, I love what you're doing for the community here as a whole. We at Mayo Clinic, as an enterprise, are so fortunate to have you to be able to carry this message forward. So I was asked to talk about my story, and I did see many familiar faces that heard part of my story when I spoke to this last year, but it kind of evolves. And I obviously have no disclosures about my story except for that I just love the sacredness of life. That would be my only disclosure. And we won't waste time with objectives. So I want to just kind of get started, and I'll just stand here for these first few slides. When it comes to a personal journey of self-discovery, there is transformative restoration. We've been talking a lot about this the last few days. Unfortunately, I missed the talks yesterday. I'm so grateful I got to hear Dr. Deisinger and the earlier talks today, Dr. Ramirez. And so there's a lot when it comes to nutrition with lifestyle medicine and movement and the importance of sleep. And sometimes that can be a little stressful, right? We can think, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this stuff wrong. How am I going to be able to balance it? And it's so important to find the harmony within when it comes to that whole person approach to care. Very, very important to try to dismiss that turbulence. We're going to, talk also about with lifestyle medicine really exploring integral aspects of growth, both the growth with being healthier versions of ourselves, kind of from those very mechanistic means, but also from more of a soulful element of personal growth. And this is what's going to really allow us to renew ourselves as people. So just go ahead and find yourself in a comfortable place. And if you want, go ahead and just rest your eyes. I know how the morning is. We're like in this fast pace to get here. We've listened to some exciting topics. So if you're comfortable, just go ahead and rest your eyes and take a few deep breaths in. And I love doing this in the middle of my day with patients. I'm oftentimes late to my next patient because I love spending as much time as possible. But in between patients, I'll pause to just be. Just take a moment to just be. Feel how the temperature of the air is on your skin. Feel how the chair is supporting your body. Feel how your feet are placed on the ground. And don't place any judgment to that. Just feel, just be. So just think of these next few questions. Who am I? Who are you? What is your purpose? And what are you grateful for? And we'll just leave it there because I want to talk about what I am so grateful for. I am so grateful to be alive, but I get goosebumps all the time, and that's going to be the last thing I talk about is this ability for me just to cultivate these goosebumps in every single thing I do, and I got goosebumps with both of the first talks. But this is really a true story, and this is so funny because as a kid, when people would come up to me and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd be 4, I'd say I want to be in a Smucker's jar. And I don't know, for those of you that remember the Today Show with Willard Scott, the Smucker's Jar celebration of the 100th birthday, cherishing the vitality of these individuals. How many of you remember this? I know. Is it still on? Do they still do that? They do 1-year-olds now too? Oh, I don't watch much TV. I need to get out more. Okay, well, I love this. So I would say I wanted to be on a Smucker's jar, to live to be 100, and I want to be a doctor. So I want to do both. So I set out to live very healthy. Fortunately, my parents were very healthy individuals. My brother had a significant epileptic illness when he was young, And so they had seen a holistic practitioner, and so whole food plant-based nutrition became a very important element of our life. And one of my favorite memories as a kid was going to the health food store. I remember back then, this is in the 1970s, opening up the grain section. They had all the grains in a cooler, and so it just had this wonderful smell of oatmeal. And to this day, that's my favorite food, is oatmeal. In fact, May, that bread, when I walked over there this morning, it had that glorious smell of what that cooler kind of smelled like. So I had the perfect childhood, went on to undergraduate studies, studied exercise physiology and nutrition at The Ohio State University, went to Arizona. I applied to one medical school. It's called the Midwestern College of Osteopathic Medicine. It was in Tempe, Arizona, and they had a really strong focus on nutrition. And that's why I selected that particular medical school. But a few weeks into medical school, I started not feeling well, and I saw a doctor. He said to use an inhaler. I saw another doctor because the symptoms didn't get better. He said to use it more. And then they continued to get worse. And so I saw a third doctor, and he said, it's in your head. This happens to all medical students. So these images I'm going to share with you, so these are AI-generated images from DALL-E 3, which is part of ChatGPT-4. I'm medical director for humanities and medicine. And so we are doing some research with the generation of what we use as words with how we can generate certain images. So some of my images come from ChatGPT, but this was a fun one. And I said, please give me an image of a doctor telling you it's in your head. And this is what it gave me. So I thought I was like, well, I'm going to pop that in my presentation. That's pretty perfect. But a few days after that doctor said I was in my head, I was walking home from class, and I collapsed. I was taken to the emergency room, and this is what my chest x-ray looked like. So for those of you that don't know, basically, the entire left side of my chest was being filled with fluid. The lung was collapsed and was being pushed towards the right side of my body. So they took me to the operating room urgently. They had to try to pull that tumor off the lung to reinflate the lung. They did a surgery called a thoracotomy. And I remember waking up after the surgery. It was a very long surgery. I was in cardiogenic shock, so I was quite unstable. And I remember there was a young girl over my bed, and she went to my medical school. I was a first-year medical student, but I had recognized her face. She was in her advanced year, third or fourth year, and she was just sobbing. And I remember I felt it was my duty to console her. I was kind of like, oh, no, it's going to be okay. And I was like, maybe it's not. I don't know. They just don't know me. It's going to be fine because it's got to be in that Smucker's jar, right? So the next morning, a group of doctors came into my room. This was November, Thanksgiving weekend of 2000. And they said, you have stage 4 cancer. It's diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. You have 3 months to live without treatment. You have 20 months to live with treatment. And my dad was sitting next to me. And here's a man that we had gardens. We had prided ourselves in eating so healthy. We were physically active. We had strong faith. How can this happen? How can this happen? The next thing they said was, you're going to have to quit medical school. And here, this is my little girl dream. And you'll never be able to have kids because we don't have time for fertility preservation. We need to start treatment immediately. And I thought, holy cow, like this guy's doom and gloom, right? Thank God he was a doctor on call because the following Monday, my actual oncologist came in. His name was Dr. Paul, and he filled my heart with hope to say, you know, we're going to do all we can do. And we're going to enter you into a study, and we're going to keep on doing the treatments we know can possibly work, and then use some that we're not really sure if they'll work or not. So I had several months of chemotherapy. I ended up having a bone marrow transplant with very high doses of chemotherapy. And this is kind of what it was like. This is another AI-generated image. But back then in the year, this was 2001, time had gone by when I had my bone marrow transplant. And you're kind of like, I was the girl in the bubble. And it was the top floor of the hospital in Arizona. And you could look out, and there was a glass door around each of the rooms, so you could see the other patients. I'd spy, like, right? These other people were dying in an effort to live. They were so sick. But I attained my vitality without pause. I had my professors and my classmates bring me up my study materials and my tests. I set my alarm every day at 4 a.m., and they had the most amazing oncologist. The reason I have a bicycle here is he knew how important physical fitness was to me, so he had 2 bikes. He had one in my room, and he said, and Dawn, I have another one out by the nurse's station. I know you like to wake up at 4 a.m. Don't tell anyone I told you could do this, but you can sneak out because you're going to go crazy if you're in this room the whole time, and you can watch the sunrise come up. And that's what I did every single morning during my bone marrow transplant. So here's a picture of me actually during my bone marrow transplant. This was right before they gave me back my cells. So I mean, I probably looked a little sick, but I don't know, the smile never stopped. I was just so grateful, and it was so amazing. All of my senses were so heightened. It was such a gift. It's truly such a gift. So, unfortunately, these doctors were wrong. So, my husband and I found out the gift of growing our family. I was pregnant. But a few weeks after delivering my daughter, I got very sick again. And in fact, the symptoms were very similar to what they felt like when I was diagnosed with cancer. I had dramatic shortness of breath. I could hardly walk. I couldn't even hold my baby. And I just thought, oh no, gosh, the cancer's back now. This is really scary, right? Totally different narrative. When I went through cancer the first time, it was just me. I could be selfish. It was so easy, actually. But now I had a daughter I had to worry about. I had a husband. Life was different, and I was scared for the first time. So remember, they took me to the emergency room, and I was, again, in cardiogenic shock, and they thought for sure the cancer was back until they looked at the echocardiogram of my heart, and it was only beating at 8%. So I had developed advanced heart failure from the chemo and radiation that they had given me, you know. They saved my life, but we created a little bit of a complication along the way, and a lot of people said, I bet you wish you never did the chemo. No, not at all. I'm happy I did the chemo because that did save my life. And this is actually when I became a patient at Mayo Clinic for the first time. It was in Mayo Clinic, Florida. And they filled my heart with hope. And they said, Dawn, we're going to use medicines. When the medicines don't work, we'll have to do procedures. And when procedures don't work, you may need a heart transplant. Let's take one day at a time. You need to start cardiac rehab. I was like, yes, I can do this. So started cardiac rehab, got stronger. And heart failure is kind of tricky, though, because with heart failure, you get strong, and then you kind of start to go down again. So this was 2003 when I was diagnosed with heart failure, and I did good for about 4 years, till about 2007. I went back to training. I was in residency. I was in my second year of residency at Mayo Clinic, and I just couldn't do it anymore. The hours were just getting so hard, so I had to take some time off. During this time, they put an indwelling device in my chest, an investigational device that would help to beat my heart in a certain sequence. They also put a defibrillator in because they knew I definitely needed one. And though they knew it was going to be a hard procedure because of the radiation, it was time to put that defibrillator in too because of some of the arrhythmias I was having. But the hardest thing actually happened to me in 2008. And we have a very big family unit, a very close family. And so every Friday, the whole family, we'd go out to dinner, like 20 people. And after this night of dinner, my husband said, honey, just go sleep with the baby. I'm not feeling well. So he went to bedroom. The next morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. Even though I wasn't working, I still wanted to keep that purpose close to me. So I was volunteering at a local clinic that was the free medical clinic in downtown Jacksonville, and they'd asked me to do a little presentation. So I woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare that presentation. I thought, this is weird. Why isn't Charles up yet? It's 4 a.m. We always woke up at 4 a.m. 5 a.m. rolled around, 6 a.m. rolled around, Sophia's up. We're just this bright, early morning family. She's like, Mommy, where's Daddy? I said, honey, he's just resting. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock roll around. She's like, Mom, where's Dad? So I went to check on him. And he had actually passed away in his sleep. So that was very difficult. And I don't think it ever gets easy. And this is probably the hardest part for me to talk about. I've had a lot of people say, you need to write a book. And I really don't know what to write yet. I looked for all the books as to what to do as a young woman. I was only 33. With a young child, and I was supposed to be the one to die, not him. But if we're awake to the transformative power of grief, suffering, loss, pain, no matter what it is, this can really move us to a place of miraculous renewal, and this provided me an opportunity to really deeply connect with my faith and belief in God, and the knowing that there had to be a heaven. And that may feel uncomfortable for some people to hear that, but there had to be a heaven. There had to be a place that was safe. My husband owned art galleries and oriental rugs, and my daughter said a really cute thing. She says, Mommy, do you think that there's rugs in heaven? Because that'll keep Daddy up in heaven safely. She had this envision of heaven and the rugs that keep him floating up there, which was really cute. So what was really interesting, though, because following his death in 2008, I never became depressed. I remember it was kind of like that Disney ride or that roller coaster ride that's like a free fall. I always had this really elevated existence, just this joyful, blissful happiness. I never got depressed, but I was really flat. I remember I couldn't have any sensory stimulus. I couldn't listen to the radio for about a year. But I started getting stronger after about a year. And I learned to show up for myself. And I have a mentor, Dr. Amit Sood, who I think is going to be speaking tonight, right? He hasn't spoken to everyone yet. So he's going to speak this evening. And this is something he told me in my training, is that when the heart beats, it keeps 5% of the blood for itself before it can serve the needs of the body. So you've got to show up for yourself. And that's exactly what I did during this time. But I think this is so pertinent because what the heart does that's so miraculous is 95% of what it does is it's supporting the need of the body. Just like us in life where we need to support the needs of others. So 2008, I continued to get stronger. I got so strong that device in my chest started actually to help my heart beat properly. And my ejection fraction went from, eventually 8%, 16%, 20%. It went up to 46%. It was amazing. So I went back to work. Finished my residency. I did a fellowship in hospital medicine, like probably one of the toughest schedules in the hospital back then. We take 21 days on call. It was crazy. It was kind of insane. My doctors were like, but they're like, she looks good. We'll let her keep on doing it. But come about 2015, again, I had overdid it. Probably would have happened anyways. It's just the natural history of that heart failure. And so in 2015, it was such perfect timing. Hospital leadership at Mayo, Florida said, we would love for you to redesign the breast center. Maybe they just recognized, maybe they're just being kind. They were like, she doesn't look so good these days. Maybe my team talked about it. I'll never know that backstory. Maybe there was one. But I thought, this is great. They're asking me to redesign the breast clinic. And I said, and you know what I would love to do? I would love to start an integrative medicine and breast health program, one that's built on the foundation of lifestyle medicine. And that's exactly what I did in 2015. So I left the inpatient setting with that intense calendar of requirements and went to the outpatient setting. The program was very successful. And on this particular day, this was September 22nd, 2016, I was given the opportunity to present to hospital leaders about the success of this program. And I wanted to grow the program through the entire institution at Mayo Clinic, Florida for other disease states, for other cancers, not just the breast center. So I finished with my morning patients and I'm rushing to these stairs. And I remember when I got to the top of the stairs, my legs were quivering. I was like, ooh. And we all do this, right? Anyone, doesn't matter if you're not. Did I eat breakfast? Yeah, I always eat breakfast. It's my favorite food, and that bread this morning was delicious. And I thought, did I have too much caffeine? And oh, Dr. Ramirez, yes, I love caffeine. So I was like, I may have had too much caffeine, but I love it. I love my coffee. I sleep like a baby, though. I sleep so good, so maybe it doesn't matter. So I'm going down these stairs, and my legs are like, oh, gosh, what's happening? And I get to the bottom, and I knew I was late for this talk, so I kind of hastily went to the boardroom door. And as I'm opening that boardroom door, I couldn't even open it. And I just thought, oh, my gosh, I am really in trouble. And usually when I would enter a room like this is, who's here at Mayo Clinic? This is how it is. They're like in suits. I kind of go against the grain. I'm always in these colorful clothes. I wear tennis shoes. They're like, you should, I need to wear tennis shoes because it's good for me to stay active with my heart. And they're like, okay, whatever, leave us alone. They leave me alone now. It's so cute. Yeah, we're trying to encourage this whole community of healthy living. So I'm like, all employees wear tennis shoes, no more high heels. So I would usually make a really funny statement walking in that room, but not on this day. I just sat, and they said, okay, your seat is at the head of the table. I thought, oh gosh, are you kidding me? And so for those of you that have ever tried to control a mouse and you just couldn't do it, right? And this silly cursor is at the opposite end of the room on this huge screen. And I'm trying to control the efforts of that mouse with the cursor, and I couldn't do it. And the silly thing is getting more and more faded. And that was my last conscious memory. So I had a 4-minute near-death experience. I was in a total flatline. My heart had gotten so weak that it could no longer even mount a beat. So it was a very fine ventricular fibrillation with asystole. And it was so amazing, this experience. I describe it as this place of complete quietude. I remember this element of air that I felt kind of come over my body. And I remember one single piece of hair seemed to be stuck in my lipstick. But I remember feeling as if my entire body was enveloped in love, as it was as if the hands of God were holding me, as if I was floating. And this near-death experience connected my non-beating heart direct to this very hopeful soul. There was still this element of knowing. And this moment of what they clinically define as death, I think I was more awake than any human may ever experience in a lifetime. It was really quite remarkable. So I've had a lot of adversity in life, but just these miraculous moments, truly miraculous. And then there was this huge wave of energy that came through my body, and it was preceded by this huge thump. And this thump actually popped me up, because I'm not that big of a person, so it really popped my whole body upward. And so the shock of the defibrillator may have brought me back to life, but Dr. Sam Azurvatham is an electrophysiologist here at Mayo Clinic Rochester. He said, nope, that's not what brought you back to life. I came back to life on my own. So truly a miracle. But I was alive. And you know what I said? I can finish that talk. They were like, oh, no, you're not. You're going to go right back to bed. You're going to lay down, and we're going to transport you. So this was 2016, and the next few years became really, really challenging. Procedure after procedure, effort after effort to try to see what they could do to salvage the heart. And my last procedure was in 2019 right here at Mayo Rochester. They did something called a MitraClip, and I had a stroke afterwards, and I actually lost the vision of my left eye. So it was like, oh man, I need a break. I remember after the procedure, I stayed actually right across the street here, and there was a really healthy restaurant. I forget what it was called. It was right across the way, something tonic. It's not there anymore, but I remember I went in that bathroom and I sat down. And I thought, oh my gosh, there is no way I'm going to be able to make it home. So shortly after that, they listed me for heart transplant. And so I didn't want to be admitted to the hospital. I wanted to try to stay at home. My daughter was in high school. I knew once you went into the hospital, you didn't come out. And you could be there for months. You could be there for over a year. So I tried to stay home. So after a year on the heart transplant list, there was still not one single call, not one single match, and I was getting more and more sick. This is during COVID, which made it even more challenging, because now all of a sudden they don't even know if it's safe to transplant a heart, because if you transplant a heart with someone who may have COVID, what does that mean? And then I got COVID. Well, I don't know. It's actually kind of interesting. So I was sick. They did this home care at home, health care at home model. On my whole food plant-based nutrition, I fasted actually with my COVID, and I actually got through it pretty decent. My blood pressures were extremely low, and I was probably much less stable than I should have been to be at home, but I figured I could probably handle it myself. I was more scared to go in the hospital. What would that mean? But it did push me right down. So in 2020 of December, I got admitted to the hospital for supportive care to help the heart beat, and I remained in the hospital the remainder of the time until they found a matching heart, which was February 5th of 2021. And I remember looking out to the nurse's station. I saw my doctor. It was at night, and he was at the nurse's station. I thought, oh, wow, someone's getting a heart. It's such a cool thing, because you get to be friends with all those other people who have been waiting for so much time. So you're so happy for whoever's heart it was. And he comes into my room. He says, can I talk to you? I have goosebumps right now as I say that, and then too. But it's so crazy, right? You'd think you'd be so excited. Here I lived with heart failure for 18 years, and I was going to get my life back. But I wasn't. I was terrified. I was so scared. Was I going to lose every memory of my beautiful childhood, every memory of my husband who passed away, every memory of my daughter growing up? Does the heart hold memories? I didn't know. I had a good colleague. I won't mention his name. He's a psychiatrist at Mayo Clinic, and he said to me, Dawn, do you even want this heart transplant? You know, personalities change. And I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't want one, but I need one. So then the next thing my doctor told me after he said we have a matching heart was, your donor has hepatitis C and is an IV drug user. And so that goes through my mind. I passed this major judgment though, right? That's a huge judgment. And so I was like, oh gosh, I need to just think about this. But after a few hours, I had this total knowing that this heart was meant for me. It actually was perfect. I was able to give this individual, I don't know why she was an IV drug user. Maybe her life wasn't as joyful as mine, but I was going to be able to give this heart just this miraculous life. And I was so excited about that. And I remember as I went down to the operating room, I had eye contact with my surgeon, Dr. Sariapoglu. And I had this total knowing everything was going to be okay. I had this total knowing that in a few days I would wake up to the new beat of my heart. And I remember when I went under anesthesia, the anesthesiologist is by my side. They told me they were ready to give me the anesthesia, not being scared. It was the only surgery, and I had many surgeries. It was the only surgery in my entire life that I had no fear. I remember praying for the donor and the donor family and just giving them so much gratefulness that they had offered their heart to me. The surgery was very complicated. This is actually my heart. They videoed my whole surgery. Not many people get to do that, but I was like, go ahead, you can video it. And they actually have my heart in the lab, and they're doing research on it to gain a lot of genetic insight. And actually what's really cool is a few weeks ago, I went to have blood drawn, and they drew stem cells, and they took those to the lab, and now they're reprogramming those stem cells to become heart muscles. That very soon, in the next few days, will actually will be beating in the laboratory. So they are going to be able to discover ways that what patients will develop these cardiomyopathies from chemo. And what they're finding is there's actually a shared gene with postpartum cardiomyopathy and that same gene from chemo, and I kind of had a double hit. So that's probably why I had gone to this extreme example of what can happen. We don't usually see this. This isn't very common for people to get chemo and need a heart transplant, or to have a baby and then need a heart transplant. It happens, but it's quite rare. So I don't want to scare people, but it may have been that I had both. That kind of set me up, and it looks like that's what was the genetic potential within my heart myocytes. Fascinating. So unfortunately, there was a complication, a major complication after my surgery because of all the radiation. I had hemorrhage. I needed 12 units of blood, and they didn't think I was going to make it. And I remember my colleagues, they broke every HIPAA law. They were texting each other. She's not making it. She looks bad. We don't know what to do. Everyone was coming up to the hospital. They said there was like anesthesiologists in line, and everyone was in line to try to help with the case, but there was people wanting to donate blood because they were at that point needing to use unmatched blood. And then a few days later, I remember waking up. And I remember waking up to this sound. And it was this miraculous sound. And it was in beat. It was in sync, I should say, to the beat of this powerful new heart I had. My body was warm, feeling for the first time in 15 years. And it was so amazing. I had complete clarity of thought. Even though I'd had all these drugs, I was so sick everything was crystal clear. And I remember describing that it felt as if every single cell in my body was oscillating at a higher vibrational frequency. I was so alive, and I have not lost that. Such a gift. I get goosebumps all the time. I just got them again. So this is really funny. I put this slide in here because this was when they were able to get me from the bed to the chair, and I am not able to take narcotics, so I did my entire heart transplant with no narcotics, and it was extremely painful. I learned the value of actually moaning. There was so much therapeutic relief with just moaning, but it was very painful. I remember I just wanted to smile so bad, and it was so hard. And not too long ago, I gave a talk, and I was in an elevator, and this woman looked at me. She goes, "You smile an awful lot." She kind of in disgust. I was like, "Ooh, wait till she's going to hear what I'm going to show her." And so I was like, "Oh, because the smile was so hard." I smile all the time now because it's so effortless. Life is just so incredibly effortless now. And so it's funny that they give you a whole bunch of medications. I still take a lot. I had one day after my transplant, I took a picture. I took 75 pills. I still take a lot of pills, but not 75 anymore. 75 pills, though. I would get so full. And by the way, they're rainbow colors. Does that count? All these pills, yeah, rainbow colors. My colorful plate. So these medicines make you kind of angry because you're on these high-dose steroids. And I remember going to bed this one night like, oh, why did I get this IV drug user heart? This was the same day that my insurance said we're not going to cover the medication to treat that hepatitis C that now was in the millions in my bloodstream because you're immunosuppressed, so you get that hepatitis C really, really quick. You'll have to get when you get home. And my medical team's like, you're not going to be able to go home for weeks because I had so many complications. I'm like, okay, so now I have hepatitis C. No medication for the hepatitis C. You're going to keep me here for weeks. So I was angry. I'm like, why did you give me this IV drug user heart thing, guys? So that I had this dream. And in this dream, I woke up in this dwelling place. And I remember running to the door, and my car wasn't there. There was a window. I looked out the window. Nothing looked familiar. So I remember crawling out this door, and there were these tall blades of grass. And do you remember as a kid when like the grass, and maybe even now, that grass kind of grabs your leg and kind of sticky, almost feels like it's going to cut your leg? I felt like that grass was kind of pulling me back. And I can remember how that felt. And I remember flipping over into my back and seeing these beautiful clouds overhead. And then in the distance, there were these families, just like this. This is an AI-generated image, but it was so similar. These families in love and harmony, peace. It's like the new earth. Everyone is just in true blissful existence in love. And then this word came over me, and the word was grace. And grace is defined as an influence which operates in each of us. And, it gives us virtue. It imparts strength to endure trial. But it was so interesting because when I woke up in this dream, after hearing that grace, I would always listen to instrumental music. And the song playing at this very moment in time was titled Grace. And I couldn't sleep after that, right? Who could sleep after that? So I opened my emails because I love to work. So I opened my emails, and the very email waiting for me at that moment was titled Full of Grace. It's just amazing. So I named my heart Grace, and there it was waiting. It was a second wind on this journey of life. And it was this fire in the belly desire to just do and use all that I was meant to be and do. Everything was effortless. Even the struggles didn't result in dead ends. And so, when we have adversity, you want to grab that. You can go one of two directions. One is post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic growth. And this post-traumatic growth is such an opportunity to help us discover personal strengths, new possibilities, and really a deep focus on your purpose. And it was my purpose that got me through my bone marrow transplant. The knowledge that I could study medicine to try to help others, to deliver that original medicine to that lens of love for humanity. That's what I always describe. During the time of having heart failure, when I couldn't really do much otherwise, I could work at being a doctor because it didn't require that much activity or action on my behalf. I could sit and I could still work. In fact, when I was listed for heart transplant, I continued to work. When I was in the hospital, I continued to work. I remember the research team came into my hospital room because I had to sign consents for patients that we were enrolling into studies. I was still doing a webinar when I was listed for heart transplant. When I was on supportive care, I was doing a webinar, and I went into VTAC. All the nurses came in. I'm like, we're going to take questions now. And I took the camera off. I'm like, you guys can't just come in like that. They're like, well, yeah, we need to. I was like, well, I didn't know. I felt fine. I don't feel my heartbeat anymore. So I didn't know that it was ready to stop again. So good, thanks. You can save my life right now. So the meaning of life is to find our gift, and the purpose of life is to really share it with others. In this moment of purpose, we just can really cultivate such amazing opportunities for inspiration, creativity. And I've really noticed that. Like, it's so fun to be in this space because these little wild ideas will come into my mind. It's like, hey, let's do this because I'm able to apply what it's like to be to a patient. How was it that I was able to thrive? How did I get through this? Well, I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think the majority of it is my lifestyle, though. It's what helped me get through. And I knew that after my transplant, I had to do something kind of extreme to get people to kind of listen, right? Maybe the story would have been enough, but I don't know. I was like, I need to do something. What am I going to do? So I told everyone, I'm going to run a marathon on my 1-year heart transplant anniversary. And they were like, well, she's totally crazy now. It's those medicines. But I did. I ran a full marathon on my 1-year heart transplant anniversary. I had incredible recovery. I'm on a lot of medications that I shared, but it didn't affect me. And I was the first person in the world to be able to do this. But I don't really share that part of it for you. I share that this is the finish line. And this is a construction sign. And the construction sign says grace. So it's pretty cool. This is one of our nurse practitioners who was running the finish line. The reason she was at the finish line with me is she wanted to take my little water pack off because she's like, that won't look good in pictures. So it's on her back. I was like, okay, but look at the number. It was 365, and they didn't plan that. That was 365 days after. But this marathon was very special to me. It was the Donna Marathon to end breast cancer, and being a physician that works with our breast cancer patients, it's a marathon I had volunteered at for many years until I got too unwell to even have the strength to volunteer. And so I had always wanted to run that marathon. And so since this time, I have a lot of patients from around the country that hear that I like to run, and they hear that I had cancer, and they're like, can you help me still run during chemo? I'm like, heck yeah. And we do these 5Ks together. So this is a group of patients. There's actually a lot more. Sometimes we have 50 to 100. This is the Mother's Day 5K we did, and so we were on the front page of the news with these amazing humans. And We want patients to exercise during chemotherapy. We know it improves cancer outcomes, it reduces fatigue, it reduces brain fog. The hospital up the street was telling their patients not to run, to hang up their tennis shoes, and they would leave that hospital and come to us. We're like, no, we want you to run. And in fact, can you do this 5K with us? We'll walk it with you. We don't expect you to run, but we want our patients to be very active during treatment. So let's look at the pillars of lifestyle medicine, because they're also very important, but the only one I'm going to focus on for purposes of my talk is this one on relationships and connection and love and harmony. I mean, this is like the feel-good stuff, right? So you can eat a perfect diet, you can move your body, you can sleep, you can avoid alcohol, you can do all this stuff perfect, but if you're turbulent and you don't love other people and connect, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work out as good for you as we want it to. So you've got to focus on the importance of connection. And 60% of adults in the U.S. report being lonely. And we know that a sense of being integrated into social networks is one of the strongest predictors of both physical and mental health. So this is something we must pay attention to. This was an interesting meta-analysis of 300,000 people that weak social ties is just as harmful as being an alcoholic and 2 times more harmful than being obese. So these are really alarming statistics to hear, and that loneliness can have the same impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So think of volunteering, think of connecting. I mean, this is not an issue for any of you. You're all here. Thank you, May. Thank you, Jang, for bringing us here in this opportunity to connect. But I love this, both horizontal connection and vertical connection. So we're going to talk first about horizontal connection and a little bit more about the science, because I just think this is very important. And this comes out of the National Academies of Science. And we know that this loneliness increases premature death from all causes, but look at these very startling numbers. A 50% increased risk of dementia, 32% increased risk of stroke, and 29% increased risk of heart disease. And for people like me with heart failure, look at these statistics. You know, I remain socially connected with my patients, with my colleagues, with my family. Loneliness increases the risk of dying from heart failure 4-fold. So it's very important. 68% increased risk of hospitalizations for heart failure patients, and almost a 60% increased risk of going to the emergency room. But my favorite part about the connections element from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is this vertical connection. So what does that mean? The vertical connection is that spiritual element, belief in something bigger than ourselves. And this, again, can be a little bit uncomfortable for people, but I love that within that relationship and connection element, this is how I kind of integrate it and start that very uncomfortable conversation with my patients is, let's talk about your connections with people. And let's also talk about your connections with something bigger than yourself, or that vertical connection. This is a lovely book by Lisa Miller, who really speaks to the science of spirituality and functional MRI, and how when people pray and experience their spirituality, how they have increased areas of the brain that actually light up on functional MRI. So this whole discussion of spirituality versus religion, you know, not everyone has religion, but many people have spirituality. And so it's important to have both, or to have one or have the other. What is important to you is what matters. Spirituality is going to be more of an individual practice. Religion is going to be more of a communal-based practice, more of a traditional, ritual, model-based practice. This slide is nice because it helps us to kind of compare and contrast the two. Folks get a lot of questions and curiosity when it comes to this. I was raised Roman Catholic. I had strong, deep belief in God my whole life, and then many of my life experiences brought me closer to that belief in God. But I believe that I have formal religion as well as spirituality in my life. So I like having this opportunity to look at that they both have approaches to the divine, that they both have different practices. Spirituality practice is probably going to be more individual unless you're going to a yoga class or a guided meditation with other people, where a religious practice is usually with a group of folks. When it comes to authoritative, when it comes to spirituality, this is largely self-directed, but religion comes from hundreds of years of tradition and ritual, and then purpose. Both are going to serve purpose that can help one relate to personal growth. The research when it comes to religion, though, is very important because it, again, brings that sense of belonging. You're having that communal relationship, and it helps to improve overall health from both physical and mental elements from 3 main core mechanisms. It just increases healthier behavior, it enhances that social support, and it really dives into that element of deep meaning and appreciation for life. And I have a lot of people that ask me, how did you get through all this? And you seem like you're so lighthearted about it, literally, right? Lighthearted. It was actually a really big heart. So I don't know if I'm lighthearted, it's probably heavy-hearted, but I'm heavy-hearted. I say I have 3 little things that kind of contributed to that grittiness, and the first is gratitude. And I'm so grateful that I had this deep belief in God. For me, it really did help me through just that knowing that in the end, even if I died, it was going to be okay. I would be with God. It was okay. I was so grateful for my medical team. I was so grateful for my amazing family and the love that they gave me during this entire time. The next was to reframe. I flipped the script on cancer and heart failure and made it a teacher of life. And it's not that things are necessarily happening to you, but maybe they're happening for you for a very good reason. And this love of fate, and again, it's that acceptance. It was such a teacher of life, every single thing that I experienced. I think we're probably getting pretty close to time here. I love this quote because it really hones in on love. And so often we seek love. And if we look at Rumi, who is a 13th century poet, this is very beautiful. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to find and remove all the barriers within you that you have built against it. And so we're all about pure love. We just have to kind of like an onion, peel it away so we can recognize and fall madly in love with yourself and accept without judgment, like we started off earlier today. Who am I without judgment? And psychological flexibility is a connection you have to yourself. Where earlier we talked about the connection with others, but the psychological flexibility allows you to connect and love yourself. When we think about ways to kind of activate that heart center, that heart core, and I love this. This is an AI-generated image also with the lotus at the center of the heart. And we all know the story of the lotus. It survives amid extreme circumstances, amid that mud, but it's so beautiful. But peace, harmony, joy, compassion, kindness, and love. So cultivating awe would be where we're going to end this talk today, but this is just being fully present to something that is greater than what we're even able to comprehend, the vastness of something sublime. How many of you get goosebumps really, really easy? Yeah, that's special. I think it's important to try to work at that. When I look at this picture, it gives me goosebumps because she is just in a state of total awe. Acts of kindness are ways that we can experience awe. Collective gatherings, church groups, rituals, gatherings just like this today, spectacular sights, nature, music, visual art, dancing, epiphanies, both birth and death. And of course, there's religious and spiritual practices. So these are just the science pathway of awe. You can take a picture of this to see that it's going to help to enhance the vagal tone, which is the relaxation element of our body. It's going to decrease the sympathetic tone, which is more the stress, fear related. It's going to decrease inflammation. It's going to increase oxytocin. That's the love hormone. It takes 10 seconds, by the way, when you hug to get that oxytocin to release. Maybe you'll get chills too. It decreases that default motor network. It increases our sense of self. It's going to increase social integration, and it gives you that deep sense of meaning and purpose, which will bring you back to love. So I'm going to end it there because I think we're out of time. I see that we're maybe having a bell. And here's my email if you have any questions. And I'm not as active on social media. It's funny. We all get very busy, right? But I try to live true to myself. So I don't have a TV, which I love not having a TV. And I am not as active on social media at all, just because I like to stay more in the present moment. I felt like I was getting more distracted. So I pop in on there once in a while. But thank you so much for your time.